This is Federalist 36, Part 3. We're going to start with paragraph 8. Just keep in mind that one of the things that Publius, whether it's Hamilton, John Jay, or James Madison, is doing in each paper, in each one of these Federalist Papers, they're explaining the Constitution. They are explaining how U.S. federalism will work once the Constitution is ratified, and also they are answering the critics, the anti-federalists that are writing in different articles and different newspapers. Two of the best ones were named Brutus and Federal Farmer, and in this paper he's answering some of this criticism by Brutus and Federal Farmer. Remember, these are pen names, pseudonyms, just like Publius is a pseudonym for Hamilton, Madison, and Jay. These are pseudonyms for anti-federalists, some of the critics. In this paper, you'll hear the word census. In the Constitution, it says that starting 1790, every 10 years, they will count the population of the United States. And they'll usually break down that division, like what people's backgrounds are. But every 10 years, they do this so that they can decide whether they need to increase the number of members of the House of Representatives, and then see which state gets how many members, and that constantly changes depending on which state's population increases or decreases. Now, I have already told you about great courses, the teaching companies classes, that they have different courses on different aspects of history, political science, philosophy, arts, and now they are online. There are two courses. One of them is called Before the Revolution. It looks at the United States before American Revolution. If you have access to it, watch that. And there is another one by Alan Gelzo. It's called American Revolution, The American Revolution. They're really good. If you can watch that, if you have time. I've said this before, they have the transcript for the professor's talks, and that helps you improve your knowledge of English and command of the language. Also, Alan Gelzo has one on Abraham Lincoln that I like a lot, because I like Abraham Lincoln a lot, and he has a short biography of Abraham Lincoln, and just, I think it's like 8 videos if I'm not mistaken. But definitely take advantage of these. These are not online. I have over the years myself used the public libraries to check them out, and it has helped me a lot. So we start in paragraph 8 of Federalist 36. I have said briefly in Federalist 36 Part 1 what this Federalist is all about, so take a look at that. And one more thing, remember, you have to read all of the 85 papers for it to really make sense. If you pick and choose, let's say read one here, read another one over there, it really doesn't make sense. You'll get part of it, but if you just follow two of these papers, it really doesn't answer. It won't be really good. Let me put it to you this way. So don't get frustrated when you start on these. Start with one and gradually go through 85, maybe spend half an hour every day or every other day, and before you know it, within a year, you've finished it all. So my recommendation is don't focus on any one or two of these papers. Just try to go through all of them. Okay, now you can just focus on listening and reading along with me. But there is a simple point of view in which this matter may be placed that must be altogether satisfactory. The national legislature can make use of the system of each state within that state. The method of laying and collecting this species of taxes in each state can, in all its parts, be adopted and employed by the federal government. In part one of this paper, I said that the federal government can use the bureaucracy of the state governments in collecting taxes for itself. So this way, it won't have to hire too many people just to do the things that states are doing. And this way also, they can kind of keep an eye on each other, and they will make the people more trustful of what the national government is doing, because it's the state people that are helping the national government. Let it be recollected that the proportion of these taxes is not to be left to the discretion of the national legislature, but is to be determined by the number of each state as described in the second section of the first article. An actual census or enumeration of the people must furnish the rule, a circumstance which effectually shuts the door to partiality or oppression. The abuse of this power of taxation seems to have been provided against with guarded circumspection. In addition to the precaution just mentioned, there is a provision that all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Notice this is where he uses the word census, and that's the population count every 10 years. And also he reminds the people that the taxes on imports that the federal government is going to get, that is going to be uniform all through the states, so there won't be any favoritism. Let's say the northern states are not going to get more than the southern states, so it'll be uniform. The rate of impost tax would be uniform. The next paragraph, it says, it has been very properly observed by different speakers and writers on the side of the Constitution that if the exercise of the power of internal taxation by the Union should be judged beforehand upon mature consideration or be discovered on experiment to be really inconvenient, the federal government may forbear the use of it and have recourse to requisitions in its stead. Okay, he's summarizing some of the criticisms or commentaries that anti-federalists are writing in the papers, in the newspapers. So here it says, this is what they're saying, but let me answer them. By way of answer to this, it has been triumphantly asked, why not in the first instance omit that ambiguous power and rely upon the latter resource? Two solid answers may be given. The first is that the actual exercise of the power may be found both convenient and necessary, for it is impossible to prove in theory or otherwise than by the experiment that it cannot be advantageously exercised. The contrary indeed appears most probable. The second answer is that the existence of such a power in the Constitution will have a strong influence in giving efficacy to requisitions. When the states know that the Union can supply itself without their agency, it will be a powerful motive for exertion on their part. So again, he's answering these critics that at one time they criticized that the federal government can tax the individual American citizens and the states can tax the citizens too. There will be double taxation, there will be unfairness. Maybe it's not a good idea to let the federal government impose any internal taxes. So he's saying no. Anyway, we've looked at this. This will not work if we cannot impose, if the federal government cannot impose taxes on individuals. And he constantly says, because emergencies arise and we cannot count on requisitions. We've done this before. We cannot count on requiring the states to, on their own, to supply the national government with revenues, because we saw during this past few years that it just did not happen. The next paragraph, as to the inference of the revenue laws of the Union and of its members, we have already seen that there can be no clashing or repugnancy of authority. The laws cannot, therefore, in a legal sense, interfere with each other, and it is far from impossible to avoid an interference, even in the policy of their different systems. An effectual expedience for this purpose will be mutually to abstain from those objects which either side may have first had recourse to. As neither can control the other, each will have an obvious and sensible interest in this reciprocal forbearance. And where there is an immediate common interest, we may safely count upon its operation. When the particular debts of states are done away with and their expenses come to be limited within their natural compass, the possibility almost of interference will vanish. A small land tax will answer the purposes of the states and will be their most simple and most fit resource. Again, he says to the people that they're saying, if federal government is able to tax the people just like the state government is, there will be confusion and that will not be good. And he says, well, once we get rid of the state debts that have been accumulated over this past few years, then the state revenues, like he said in one of the other papers, it's really easy to calculate the state revenues or the state's needs for revenue. And he says that can be done maybe by tax on land or something, real simple and easy. So once we go through this short space of maybe a decade or so, then everything will work out best. This way people will be happier, and the governments, whether it's the state government or the federal government, can do its job right.